that we should all be encouraged to use the speakers and just as importantly turn them off when we finish speaking.
Yes, Chair.
Is that right? Okay, that will help. So welcome everybody to the Housing Scrutiny Commission meeting this evening. Before we get into the agenda, I think it'd be a good idea if we on the committee introduced ourselves, and if any of the officers who are here tonight would like to introduce themselves as well. So if we start with Dr.
Hello, I'm Dora Dixon-File and I'm a member of this committee.
Councillor Bill Williams, member for Rotherhithe, member of the committee.
So, Councillor Gavin Edwards, chair of the committee.
Councillor Hamish McCallum, Vice Chair of the committee.
Councillor Jack Buck, member for Faraday Ward and member of the committee.
Councillor Nick Johnson, Surrey Docks, and member of this committee.
I'm Councillor Leo Pollack, I'm the current member for Social.
Start again. I'm Councillor Leo Pollack, I'm the Cabinet Member for Social Regeneration, Great Estates and New Council Homes.
And are there any of the officers who would like to introduce themselves this evening? Go ahead.
Doreen Forrest-Brown, Director of Wonderful Officer, but I'm here tonight in my capacity as Scrutiny has just moved to my management responsibilities, so I just wanted to come and say hello.
Hello.
And to just observe the meeting.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Doreen. And if you'd like to, I mean, I know we're doing introductions, so we'll move on to the other officers in a second, but if you'd like to take this opportunity to say anything more about the kind of things that you're going to be doing, then please feel free. If not, don't worry about it, because I haven't forewarned you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I'm conscious that Shelley has moved on, and I'd just like to again to acknowledge all the fantastic work she's done in the Scrutiny, and we have worked together to make sure that this transition is very smooth for the staff who were impacted by it. I'm very pleased to say that I held interviews yesterday for the post of an acting head of Scrutiny, and I'm delighted that we have made an agreement. I can't announce that till tomorrow,
Okay.
because I'm still in negotiation with the successful applicant. But what I would say is that we had 3 applications for the acting post that was set out for development opportunity internally for staff. And I was incredibly impressed by the quality of candidates that we had applying for. Like, it's a real testament to Southern in the sense of the way that it's developed its staff and that kind of succession planning, that we had 3 members of the existing staff group who felt able to step up, and it was a really, really difficult choice. So, just to give you kind of a bit of suspense, but I will write to you all tomorrow to confirm the successful candidate. But I'm delighted that we have made an appointment. I think the other thing that I would say is that there has been money identified for an extra resource for the Scrutiny team, and I'm absolutely committed to move forward to undertake that recruitment as soon as possible, working with the new board, and I've been in consultation with Fitz and the team about what that role might look like. And that will be the first priority for the new head, will be to work with me to get that position in place. So I'm delighted that I can say that there will be more resources allocated to the scrutiny functions. And I look forward to continuing to work with members and to having the scrutiny functioning.
All the world.
All the world.
Yeah.
Best city in the best world.
Wonderful. Well, look, thank you for coming along this evening and explaining the situation, and it's good to hear the good news and about the new officer as well. And I think to be fair, I think there's been a wider recognition. There's been a bit of need for some additional resources for some time. So it's really great to hear that, and hopefully it'll kind of help boost our work and the support that we get. Chris, I'll come back to you to do introductions in a moment. No, don't worry, it's fine. Are there any other officers who are here tonight who'd like to introduce themselves at this juncture? Okay, go ahead.
I'm Nick Lucas, and I'm Director of Environment, and I'm here as an observer.
I'm Stuart Davis, I'm the Director of New Homes, and I'm ultimately responsible for delivering the council's targets.
Thank you, both of you. So what we're going to do is just start moving through some of the formalities at the start of the agenda, and then we will come on to the Cabinet Member interview with Councillor Pollack. So first of all, apologies. So I haven't been notified of any apologies for tonight's meeting. Has anybody else got any news for me on that front?
Only Iona Nigotia,
Mm.
co-opted member centre, apologies.
Okay, we will record those for the minutes. Moving on, notification of any items which the chair deems urgent, so I haven't been notified of any items. Disclosure of interests and dispensations. Would any members of the committee wish to disclose any interests or dispensations at this stage? Thank you very much. So moving on to the minutes, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the open section of the meeting on the 28th of October. Can we agree those as a record of that meeting? Okay, thank you very much. So, item 5, Cabinet Member interview with the Cabinet Member for Social Regeneration, Great Estates and New Council Homes, a very long title. Councillor Leo Pollock. Leo, welcome to the Housing Scrutiny Commission this evening. As I've forewarned you, it'd be great to kind of get your introductory remarks and thoughts around, and thank you also for the statistics and paper that you've given us this evening. So it'd be nice to get your thoughts initially, and then we'll go into questions from members of the committee. Over to you.
Sure, thank you. So I'll assume that the figures that I sent through to you are taken as read, which basically set out the extent of the programme, the different sites that we're working on, and the movement through the pipeline at different stages over the coming years, as well as over the last few months and years.
So, could I just ask, when were those figures sent over?
Last Friday. Yeah. Sorry, Chris, I did also forget, I was going to give you the chance to introduce yourself as well, so please go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Chris Carriage and I'm 10 Brett from Thames Council.
Thanks very much. Right, Liam.
And I will share those figures with you, Chris, as well afterwards. I hope that's not me. Okay. So I just wanted to give a quick. Let me make sure that isn't me, because it may be. Stick it on out. It's not me, because. All right. Well, I was going to use this as a little guide to flick through, because a number of you may have heard some of these remarks quite recently, but I'll go through it again as well. So I just wanted to really give an overview of what we've been doing in the New Homes programme, and kind of talk through a recap, reminder of why we do this, why we have a New Homes programme on the scale and with the focus that it does. How we do it, because there's been some quite significant changes to the process of how we deliver homes in the last year and a half, and also just crucially what we're doing, so getting into some of the specifics. So the backdrop, as you'll know, is that we have over 11,000 households on our waiting list. That's almost 25,000 individuals who do not have the right kind of housing here in Southwark, and those are the ones who make their way onto the council homes waiting list. Obviously, when the intermediate waiting list is developed over the next year or two, we will see a much fuller registered extent of housing need across the borough. Part of that as well, over 2,000 families in temporary accommodation. That's in spite of the pioneering work that we do on homelessness reduction in this borough. That's over 3,000 children growing up in temporary accommodation. So it's an absolute, we call it a housing crisis, we call it a housing emergency, and it absolutely is. And the imperative is to deliver new council homes that are genuinely secure, high quality, and genuinely affordable for Southwark residents as quickly as possible, but to do it in a way that leaves a really strong long-term legacy, so that they'll last for many generations to come. The council plan targets to deliver 11,000 council homes, as you know, over a generation, including 1,000 within this electoral term from 2018 to 2022. And just the backdrop in terms of private rents, where the private market for housing is at present, the average two-bed property in Southwark is currently being let at over £24,000 per annum. The average asking price that is shown on Zoopla for a two-bed property is over £900,000. And we know that average individual incomes around the 30,000 mark, household incomes between 40 and 45. So it is a real pressure on people in terms of housing limiting their life chances. Essentially, it takes too much out of their finances, It affects the ability of children to make children's educational attainment, their psychological development, the ability of younger people to make their way in the world. And we know that it affects the vitality of the city as well, very fundamentally, and it is a crisis. And the reason why we set up our New Homes programme the way we do is to be that developer that, yes, we secure as much affordable housing as we can through the planning system. We encourage housing associations to go far beyond the 35% as and where they can, but we are the main countervailing force, the council as a developer, to really maximise the supply of social rent homes and other types of genuinely affordable homes. So I want to talk about the ways in which we've changed how we build council homes. So the key thing really is what we call the estate improvement plan approach. That's part of the Great Estates programme, the motto of which is to expand and enrich our council estates, to celebrate them and affirm them for the long term. What we mean by that really is very simply to build new council homes on appropriate sites within estates or extend estates, and to enrich by improving the look and feel and the experience of living on those estates. And in practice, it changes the frame, the way that we frame new homes projects that are brought forward on housing estates, and obviously most of our projects are on existing housing land. So fundamentally, we are always asking residents to bring forward soft improvement projects, particularly to the communal environment, that can be identified by them, that can really help turn our estates into properly prized spaces, which is what we're always aiming to do when we have that. One of those big asset management moments where new homes investment is coming in, is to try and broaden the coverage and get the best impact for everybody. And the key other thing is really just that we align new homes development with the major work cycle much better, so that we ensure an uplift in everyone's living environment, not just those who are lucky enough to get a new home. It's also worth touching on the local lettings offer. So we have current policy to offer 50% local lettings to registered households in the immediate area around a development site, and we're giving consideration at the minute, strong consideration, to just having much more flexibility on that front. So depending on the demand of new council housing and the impact of the development as well on particular people. So we talk about the phrase up to 100% local lettings, could be 0, could be 100. But where people are vacating existing homes in good condition, we're eager to give them priority specifically to maximise the chain of benefit from new homes that are delivered. So if people are vacating homes that can then be relets and put back onto the housing register that are in genuinely good condition, then we're keen to kind of promote that. We've also introduced a policy very recently that we would pre-allocate the new homes that we deliver to residents. Around 10 weeks after construction starts, they would appear on the Home Search platform for people to start bidding. And the point of that really is to give residents the opportunity to influence the type of home they live in. So giving them a choice over bathroom and kitchen tiles, flooring, painting, finishes, these sorts of things that are often seen as the preserve of private sector development. We can absolutely do that in council housing. I don't see why not. And it also means that we can start tailoring specific homes to specific individuals, particularly those who might be under-occupying but need a bit more of an incentive to free up a larger home, so that we can get that chain of benefit and people rehoused as best as possible. I want to talk about design as well. A number of you have been banging on about design for many years. We have a fantastic design approach in the borough. We've had council home schemes that are nominated and sometimes winning Inside Housing Awards, REBA Awards. We are close to establishing a new design review panel where the cohort of architects will be critiquing and raising the standards of each other's projects. We've also introduced 2 new frameworks. One is kind of focusing more on professional technical services, but also has architects with it. Another we have just brought forward in partnership with London Housing Consortium, which is very quality focused. It covers also municipal design in areas outside of housing, so commercial buildings, industrial buildings, social care buildings, etc. But the key thing really about it is that we've also got special lots that are for smaller emerging practices. So because we have really talented architects who work with us, but we also know that there is a wealth and depth of talent who often doesn't find their way into public sector design. So we're eager to really change the procurement rules in such a way that we can raise the bar significantly. And what's amazing is we've had over 360 responses to that framework, despite the fact that we've only got a couple of dozen declared sites, although we are obviously expanding the programme. It's one of the most popular architect frameworks anywhere in the country for a very long time. So really, really positive. Southwark's the place to come to if you are a really ambitious, idealistic designer. We're also updating our design guide, just embedding some of the principles of estate improvement plans and the Great Estates Programme. So we want to make sure that the new blocks sit comfortably within their existing estate, so they don't have that sort of stark difference between old and new, and that there is a sense that they are a natural extension rather than a kind of clumsy imposition. There are new fire safety provisions and building safety provisions, new terms on space and light standards, standards for storage, standards for connectivity. We retain the things in terms of having warm lighting that's flattering to all kinds of human skin tones, minimum letterbox heights to make it easier for postal workers to avoid spinal injuries, and obviously canvassing election time makes that a little bit easier as well. Not that not that would ever influence. Sorry, I didn't say that out loud. We're eager to be developing some terms on older people's housing as well, and we have secure by design features as well. But there's also a section on sociability by design because we're wanting to build community with the new housing that we deliver. And just to remind. The council plan commitment is that all council homes look noticeably better than private development. So if you think that's not the case, say so, and we'll put that challenge to ourselves, to our architects, to the residents who are working on the design to make sure that it absolutely is. Another part of that programme as well is in relation to our response to the climate crisis. There are arguments. I saw Ollie Wainwright, one of the Guardian journalists, the other day saying just stop demolishing, stop building. And I think there is a temptation, I think, in some of these narratives that responses to the housing crisis could potentially illustrate responses to the climate crisis and vice versa. So we're really eager to double down on the way in which we build to make sure that we're doing both at once. So there's three areas we're generally focusing on. One, most important, is just the operational efficiency, the energy retention of new homes that we build. We're looking at potentially introducing new minimum EPC ratings of just the top two standards of A and B. We're looking very closely at the technical notes coming through passive house schemes, such as at Agar Grove in Camden or Goldsmith Street in Norwich, where they're council homes and they're built to quite kind of disciplined budgets. And we're incorporating new heat store, energy efficiency, renewable technologies into our projects. There's photovoltaics, there's air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, energy management systems introduced into most of our projects now. And of course, if you want to come see some of those in action, don't hesitate to say so. The other side of it is embodied energy. So the really difficult thing is that most new buildings are built out of concrete and steel because they're the best materials available and have been for a very long time, but they have huge carbon emissions associated with them along the supply chain. There's lots of initiatives to try and clean up steel and develop new forms of clean concrete, cement production that is less polluting. But we're eager to also look at ways in which we can use materials that are much cleaner in terms of their embodied energy and their embodied carbon. So one of those is around timber building, specifically fire-safe engineered timber, cross-laminated timber that has been proven that passes a lot of tests, that maintains its integrity at much higher heats than steel ordinarily would. He says. So we'll be introducing that into at least 4 schemes that were existing in the pipeline, and we've got a bit of a pathfinder to see to what extent we can bring that forward much further. But the key thing really is that you're building from materials that are from actively managed sustainable sources, as opposed to something that we know is having a big impact on our environment. And alongside that, it's just promoting reforestation options at mayoral level and at national level in any way we can, specifically for building purposes, but also for every other kind of purpose you can think of as well, and including and especially in the green belt, which in my view is not put to very good use at the minute. It does the job of limiting urban sprawl, but not much else, unless you play golf. And one other thing as well that we're incorporating into design guides, which is just to try and think through what the nature recovery plan of each project might be. So that's about more than incorporating bird boxes and bat boxes and insect houses. It's promoting the broader biodiversity strategy, having a wider view about the habitats that we're creating, not just for humans. And there's a piece of work where we'll be meeting with the London Wildlife Trust soon to try and develop that thinking a bit further. And always replanting trees that may be lost and making sure that we're increasing tree canopy coverage with each scheme that we bring forward. I want to touch on funding as well, because development costs a lot of money. So generally we fund our schemes through a mix of Section 106 sums built up historically through the planning system to build off-site affordable housing, GLA grant, so we secured £89.5 million from the Mayor of London, would have been the year before last, it's 2020 now, to support 900 homes. So that was less than half of our overall bid, just to give an indication that national government haven't respected its mandate, in my view. Not that you were asking, but and right to buy receipts that we can retain. They were restricted in how we use them, so it can only cover 30% of the development cost. It has to be spent within 3 years. It can't be combined with grants. If you don't spend it in that time, you have to return it to Treasury interest. The Mayor of London allowed us to ring fence those sums up to a point, but it's not a great setup and an obvious reform that we desperately need nationally. Capital receipts from homes that we build for sale, though the proportion of sale homes in our programme is much, much lower than for any other London borough. Our explicit goal is to maximise the proportion of social rent housing, given everything that I talked about at the beginning. And then, of course, the key thing that happened year before last was the HRA debt ceiling was lifted, which enables us to borrow a bit further. It is a few hundred million further, but in the context of 11,000, in the context of the housing need that we have in the borough, it's still not enough, really. The forecast for new spending, we spent 99 million in the current financial year. That's likely to move up to 237 million in the next financial year, just because so many of the sites are now actually coming into play where we're paying the builders and then we're actually getting movement through the pipeline. And that figure will likely go up in the year after for 21 and 22. There's more I could talk about on funding, but I won't. But if you want to ask questions, by all means do. The pipeline that you'll see is that to date we completed 669 of those homes. We know that at least 187 will be completed in this calendar year, a further 228 the year after, and then it's really in 2022 when we see the fruits of our labours over the last few years coming through in a big way. So all of those subsequent years, each of the 3 years from 22, 23, 24, we're projecting at least 500-600 homes in each of those years. So it's a really significant volume of work that's coming forward. We're eager to accelerate the programme. So to that end, I think a key thing that we've done is we've put new resource into the team. We've really built the capacity. We've appointed a new director in the form of Stuart Davis to oversee the new homes programme, and there are over 30 new project managers, legal procurement officers, design advisors, quality inspectors who are now working in the programme that weren't there only a year and a half ago. We're pretty much set up as a medium-sized housing association now, so it's really exciting the things we can do with that. We have really detailed project monitoring on every scheme with clear milestones and mechanisms to stay on track. And I think the kind of instruction that we kind of always set ourselves, the steer I've given to officers is just that any part of the process that really doesn't need to be there, take it out. And any part of the process that happens in sequence that could be done in parallel, do it in parallel. And I think one of the key areas where we'll be looking to do that in earnest that makes such a big difference is on construction. The tendering process can be extremely long, especially given the squeeze on construction skills and material supplies. So we're looking to honour our council plan commitment to set up a construction company that's properly embedded into the delivery process, so that we're speeding up delivery, reducing the cost of development, embedding ethical practices in how we do construction, because there's a lot of dodgy stuff that goes on, and crucially just building up the skills base of our programme and the needs that we have. And you'll see the fruits of that. I think our new hoardings that we'll be bringing forward soon will have details of how you can work on that site, work through this construction skills centre, and end up actually building the home sometimes that you might end up living in. So we're trying to create that kind of nice sort of perfect circle here in Southwark. We're accelerating the programme and we're expanding the programme. This is the bit that's really exciting. Since in the last year and a half, we have bought 8 sites, some of them enormous, along the Old Kent Road, some in Rotherhithe, in Bermondsey. We're close to potentially buying some in other parts of the borough as well. And further to that, it was quite satisfying the day after that miserable election to be able to come in here and sign off 21 new council home sites on existing estates to be approved for design and consultation work to begin in earnest. And that's just 21. There's likely to be between 20 and 40 additional sites that are brought into the programme in the next few weeks. So it's a real ramping up of the activity that we have. I want to just touch on a few specific areas that I know might be of interest to the Commission. So, estate regeneration.
Say another couple of minutes, Leo. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, this is,
I am
you're not rambling. You're hitting on the points I think we'll want to ask about. But give it a couple
Okay.
more minutes, and then we'll go into questions.
Okay, I'll rattle through. So, estate regeneration set up always as an estate improvement plan, but very much on the terms of the expand and enrich approach and the clear terms and circumstances for any redevelopment proposal that we bring forward. That's net increase in council homes, right to remain for all residents, a very deep design and consultation process with residents, and of course, if it's comprehensive redevelopment, a ballot of affected residents. And it's important to mention that because obviously this borough has some history with estate regeneration, and we're going about that process in quite a different way now. And to date, on Tustin Estate, where we are having that dialogue, where it is genuinely resident-led, they chose the architects, they wrote the brief, and to date, I think we're making good progress. But it's a very different approach to what you may have seen previously. I can't not mention rooftop housing because we've set up the first bespoke development principles for it here in Southwark. We have hundreds of structurally sound flat roof blocks with clear secure access, no amenity impacts if you built on top of them. If you evolve estates in this way, you are preserving the embodied energy and carbon of existing buildings, you're improving the efficiency of existing buildings, and we've created these principles for maximising the benefits and minimising the impacts for residents. That's crucially, number one, building off site as much as is possible so that we can be on site for as brief a period as time, minimise the nuisance. Number two, that we offer first dibs for all residents who live immediately underneath, tenants, leaseholders, on the register, not on the register, so long as they're returning homes back to the council in good condition, and block improvements that accompany it so that we're making sure that that we're getting that wider uplift. Then, of course, any new roof lift or landscaping accompanied with that project is non-rechargeable. So it's a compelling offer, and we've got potentially between 20, 30, maybe 50 sites, he says, hedging the steer's direction, that may come into the programme depending on residents' appetite for it. But it's a key route to delivering new homes. I think the key bit, just to sum up, is that we're going hell for leather really to unfurl all these different routes to 11,000 council homes. We're building new partnerships on land, on building up capacity, on resources, and always with organisations that are properly aligned with our values and our objectives, which is to maximise the supply of secure social rent housing in the council's management, and our values, doing it quickly but doing it well, and really engendering pride of place with our developments. So with Leathermarket, CBS, we have a fantastic project around the corner from here, Marklake Court, and we've now extended and deepened that partnership to a further 9 sites. The Devil Street project on the former Joseph Lancaster School is now on site. With British Land as well, a fantastic project that will start on site no matter what, Bill, this year. Roberts Close by Russia Dock Woodlands, a partnership with TfL for a new council homes project at Styles House. That has a really strong community involvement in it. And we've got discussions ongoing with housing cooperatives, with large landowners, and even faith groups as well. So we're looking to set up a housing and faith seminar group, discussion roundtable, not quite sure yet, hopefully next month, with a number of faith groups and particularly churches who have development aspirations, to just talk through what are the moral drivers, what's our response to the housing crisis, and how can we work in partnership as a council to bring forward the housing that our communities desperately need. So that's pretty much the sum of it. There are some pressure points as well. Government support for council housing since the election, not very good. They're raising the rate of borrowing, the rate of borrowing, the increase to the Public Works Loan Board interest rate. Basically adds an additional repayment cost of over 12 million to the council. Just one little stroke of the pen in Whitehall. There are challenges obviously just in relation to construction skills, material supply. We have ever rising tender returns, and we have real fears obviously about the impact of Brexit deterring construction workers, EU nationals from staying here and helping us build the council housing that we want. And there's challenges obviously about when you're introducing new staff and new practices to properly bed in, so just embedding some of those new processes. But I'll leave it there because I'm sure we want to get into questions.
That's a really good summary, and I was only hurrying you along because I think that people are keen to get asking questions on a number of different areas. So I've got some questions, but I'll throw it open to the committee first. So I've got Dora first, and then to H.
Dora, go. You can. That's a brilliant report. Fantastic work by you and the team. Really.
I'll just say congratulations, basically. Fantastic report, fantastic work by yourself and your team. It's really, really inspirational, actually. And we need this inspirational change. It's been a long time coming, so well done. So that's the congratulations bit.
This is going to be a sharp.
No.
She's sharpening that.
A few nice questions. I mean, you talked about the design, which is very important for council housing. Again, it's a new thing. We've not talked about it for decades. It's really important that we get the design right and that we treat our residents as really sort of special people, important people, people who deserve best housing. I'm just wondering, I've just come from a quick meeting on the Crawford estate. So they've got the Quality Homes Improvement Project officers down there from Energy and etc. One of the things that one of my residents raised with me just this evening was about how heavy those security doors are. I wondered if that's something that could be taken up, because even if you're not frail, they are quite heavy. I think we should be looking at that, and because that's a worry, and I think it's all to do with the design. Also, you talked about energy and making homes better, more efficient. I wonder also if you can look at things like getting residents involved in the landscaping of the premises. I say that for two reasons. One, because that's always like a forgotten thing when we build new homes. It's always like the least important thing. We don't want to spend extra money on it. But what we could do is encourage residents moving into these new buildings to sort of say, look, here's a patch of land, we don't have the money for it, frankly. Can you guys get together and do an allotment or choose your planters? And it will serve more than two purposes, actually. It will just get people together, they'll bond together, and I think that would be a really good idea. It will help us as a council to save money, but also encourage residents to bond and work together. Then you gave us this information about how many houses, etc. we're building. Could we have it in colour, do you think, please? Sure. I don't know if it's available, but it's not in colour. You talked about.
Yeah, I think the online version is in colour, but I think just the print.
So many different ways of explaining. This is a program.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I can ask somebody to get me it in colour.
So heavy security doors, landscaping. Was there anyone?
Just two more points, please. You talked about faith and housing again. Very, very important subject. Well done. But please don't forget our churches in Campbell Green, because that's there's lots of churches you can tap into there, and also the black churches in Old Kent Road, please. And one last thing, I can't have you here in front of me, Leo, without mentioning my favourite topic, the construction charter.
Yeah.
When are we going to have that come to the full council, please? Thank you, Chair.
No problem.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me just write that down because there's quite a bit. All right, thank you. You're very kind, and it is a collective effort. Obviously, our officers work tirelessly around this. They have a real sense of mission, and it's great to hear. I think for them, just to know that there's a political wind behind their back as well, and it's a collective effort with the councillors as well. There's a lot of that involved engagement with residents that's absolutely critically important. So thank you. On heavy security doors, of course, security doors shouldn't be difficult to open and close. So let's definitely have a look at that for the design guide, because we're close to finalising it. So we do have a bit of a window to just sort out some details. So thanks for raising that. In terms of involving residents in landscaping, you're preaching the gospel here. That's kind of at the essence of the Great Estates ethos and approach. Estate improvement plans are all about being the authors of your estate, about owning the spaces on your estate. They're your estate, and it's about bringing people together fundamentally. So we do that now with new homes projects. I think we've got landscaping workshops. I think the next two are at the Lindley estate. There's another one at the Rennie estate in my ward. A quite elaborate landscaping plan there, potentially. But it's absolutely part and parcel of the project. When I talk about identifying those soft projects, allotments, food growing, gardening, painting and lighting projects, waste infrastructure, signage and wayfinding, public art projects, you name it, we really can incorporate those into new homes projects, because we're building up those partnerships as well with other organisations who can support it. Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And on the faith and housing piece, I mean, absolutely. So in Camberwell Green, in fact, I was at the Ward Forum when you invited me along the other day, that I met Jonathan Roberts, who St Michael's, the Reverend Jonathan Roberts. He's obviously knows a bit about development and is the advisor for Church of England in this diocese. So he'll certainly be on the invite list. We'll be talking to him in particular, obviously, because there's a big agenda there. And on the construction charter, it's coming to agenda planning next week. So we're there.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leo, for your presentation, which was, I think, was pretty comprehensive, and it really is. I mean, it is clear. I've got to say, it is really clear how much passion you have for your portfolio, and I think I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of the committee and all councillors in this borough in saying that council housing is incredibly vital and incredibly important, and it's fantastic that Southwark is putting such an effort into improving and delivering council housing in the borough. That said, I want to just ask a few questions or I'll ask a few points around the numbers. Obviously, the commitment in the 2014 manifesto was 11,000 council homes, which I think was then caveated a little while after to within 30 years. So that's obviously sort of the mid-40s, effectively. It's obviously good to see the number of starts and the number of starts in the data that you've shared increasing this year, and it's good to see the effect that would likely have in a couple of years' time. But on the numbers that you've presented at the moment, which presumably account for the entire pipeline that you're certainly were aware of at the end of December when these numbers were put together, the number of completions and indeed the number of starts does taper off again after those years. I mean, they're kind of they're peaks in the delivery cycle, and I suppose my worry is, or what I'd like you to perhaps address, is that even looking at all of these schemes and new homes within the programme, actually we're not at a proportionate point on track to achieve that 11,000 new homes commitment in that time frame. And so I'm keen to understand whether you think differently to that, or well, and maybe some commentary on that would be useful. So that's the kind of, I suppose, the main kind of overarching issue. But there are a few further points. One of which is that obviously the numbers that we're talking about here are about new homes delivered, but it's not the net increase in homes. And obviously we are continuing to lose council homes in the borough, both through demolitions and sales, and also, of course, through right to buy. You, within your portfolio, Leo, in addition to being responsible for new homes, you're also responsible for the council's position on right to buy. And I remember that you authored, I must say, actually a very good article a year or so ago, talking about your aspirations for change in that area, including some things which you were hoping that Southwark might be able to do directly. I think, for example, through covenants that perhaps could be placed within the leasehold interest that's being sold. And I'd be grateful for an update on that. But also, I suppose, more holistically, actually, what is the situation in terms of the number of council homes in the borough overall? Is it actually broadly static? Is it increasing? Is it even decreasing, even with the fantastic efforts that are being put in? The final point I just want to kind of raise, and it's more of a detailed point, I suppose, is around section 106 purchases. I assume what this refers to in the way this data is presented is where the council is buying back units that have been agreed as part of a section 106 agreement in an existing scheme. And so buying them back as council homes, and obviously there is a benefit in its own right in those being council homes rather than under a registered provider. But obviously it slightly distorts the numbers of affordable homes being delivered overall, where homes that should ordinarily form part of the 35% proportion of a private scheme coming forward being delivered as affordable, if part of that's being transferred back to the council, it's not necessarily a new affordable home. It might be an additional council home, sure, but it's not necessarily a new affordable home. And I recognise that's happened to a point up until now, but I was hoping you might give some assurance that that wasn't going to be a dominant part of the programme going forward.
Thank you for the support, hugely appreciated, and I do absolutely acknowledge that a number of Lib Dem councillors have been really constructive in their engagement with new homes projects in their wards, so thank you for that. In terms of peaks and volumes, there's always a kind of hedging about how much pipeline to declare. So this is my favourite graph because this is the entire programme on a page, and there's more in this than there are in the things that I sent you, but there are projects that aren't yet quite into the system sufficiently. But actually, when it comes to peaks and troughs, if anything, I think the volume might increase after the period that we've been able to show at this point, simply because some of those sites on the Old Kent Road, possible site down in Peckham and Nunhead, these are about building new council estates on new land. In Rotherhithe as well, there's some really significant volume that's coming forward, and I'm also very confident that a lot of the partnerships that we're developing, I'm convinced that some of them will come to fruition in terms of identifying new land and new development opportunities. So in terms of the overall, there's always kind of there's different points along the horizon by which you can see, but the furthest point in the horizon that I can see, which is one where all the stars align and everything just works absolutely perfectly, and I obviously feel a bit differently about that now after the election, but I do see a route to up to 14,000 council homes, and I do even see a route to delivering 11,000 before 2043 and beating those targets. But it's a great corporate challenge for this council to try and rise to, and the amazing thing is we're rising to it now. We've got every department pulling in the right direction, trying every which way to make it happen. So, and I'm happy to share a bit more of those details with you in terms of the future pipeline as well, to make sure there aren't those peaks and troughs. And of course, there's lots of external factors that might affect that as well. On the net increase piece, so it's council policy to always have a net increase in council homes when we're redeveloping estates, and That's the principle that we're following in the conversations we're having at the minute, where there are redevelopments, be it significant redevelopments or even just small ones, where it's just a small block of bedsits where we're building something large there. Always a net increase, because this is all about building up the social housing stock and meeting the needs of our residents. And I would just say to that as well, that we're doing everything we can to apply those principles retrospectively as well. So, Councillor Buck here has been absolutely steadfast in trying to do all that we can to apply those principles at the Aylesbury estate, and that's still an ongoing piece, but I think there's definite progress being made in that direction. On right to buy, I'm looking in Dorian's direction a bit here. So this was a very sort of speculative thing that we wanted to put in the manifesto, because we just recognised the fact that since the coalition Lib Dem Tory government reduced the discount right to buy in 2012, we've lost over 1,300 social homes have been privatised in this borough, and those are homes that could have been meeting housing need, but they are instead often being rented out, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times what the social rent might be. I have a bit of casework at the minute of somebody who, just a single mother, who just had a baby, ended up in a hostel, and then through housing options, the only options that were there, she ended up privately renting a flat on the Neckinger estate for £1,300 and is facing insecure tenancy. It is just absolutely shocking that, she's somebody who works all that she can, claims the maternity allowance that she can, and should absolutely, in an ideal world, qualify for a council home and have that security and stability that she needs and that her child needs. So this is why we wanted to really double down on this. And the two kind of core ideas that we were promoting were, yes, the first thing that we to make sure that we write in covenant, that we test the ability to write in covenants into new right to buy leases, saying that if you do want to rent these sublet, you have to do so at social rent and through the council and meet housing need and not be part of this loss of stock problem that we have. And the other one as well that we were lobbying on was to have a kind of one in, one out cap on the number of right to buy applications there can be. So in any given, it's not a great idea actually, if you think about it, it doesn't make progress, but it stops the fall backwards. So we would cap the number of right to buy applications you can have in 1 year against the number of social rent completions there's been in the previous year. So you're never falling backwards, at least. And we were kind of dangling these ideas in front of other Tory housing leads elsewhere in London to see if they might jump, and we could effectively dismantle the orthodoxy of loving right to buy, which is like a core Tory value. It didn't work. And in terms of embedding them into covenants, we tested it through very well qualified QCs. I wanted the most adventurous QC we could find. We had a very adventurous one, but legally it just didn't quite stack up. Dorian can certainly speak to that a little further. But we're not going to leave that agenda alone at all, because right to buy remains an absolute scourge on. It's the biggest privatisation this country has ever seen, and I really believe in the fact that councils should be able to control housing stock and meet need and build really strong mixed communities, and it doesn't support that agenda. You mentioned Section 106 purchases, so your colleague, Councillor Linforth Hall, asked the exact same question last year, and I'm going to give the exact same answer, which is simply, of course, it's not going to be a core part of the programme, but where opportunities do arise, and where, crucially, the quality of those homes meets our standards, we think that they are properly manageable and durable, we will take an interest in it. I think there is often I think it's just not correct to think that we're somehow double counting when we purchase affordable homes, because a developer, when they build their 35% homes, intermediate social rent, will still sell those homes onto a housing association. They still have a development value, and I think the key thing really is just to assure you that we don't massively overpay. We don't pay the full development value as if they're private homes. And I sent Maria last year a kind of little table showing what we paid for at Sylvan Grove, at Churchyard Row, and I can do that to you again if you want. But yeah.
Okay. Bill. Oh, thank you, Chair. Thanks for this, Leo. It's really detailed and very comprehensive.
and it's an excellent example of municipal socialism in action. You mentioned earlier on about design of the frameworks, and you're putting together a new panel, and I wondered if there's resident involvement in that, and if not, why not? If so, great. Who are they? Where are they? Two, because it's such an ambitious programme, what's the level of I don't know, fight for space, if you like, where we have a target to meet versus amenity space, yeah? And if I can make one statement, because I only have two questions, and that's this, but it's important. It's going to be evident over the next 15 to 20 years that large pockets of our borough are going to be permanent building sites, and I can cite my own ward in question as a point, with the Canada Water Master Plan hopefully going live pretty shortly, and all of the new housing that you've listed here. We have to continue, and I look to both political parties that make up this council and any others that may join it in the future, because we are both signed up to the provision of council housing. I hope that whatever opposition parties join this council, including the current one, continue to support that, because living in a building site is no easy thing to do, and we have to remember why we're doing that 10, 15 years hence. You know, I just want to make that marker now.
Yeah. Agree with all of that. Absolutely, Bill. I'll just go item by item. So in terms of design panels and resident involvement and influence, so we are doing that now. So certainly at the Tustin, the resident group, well, before even the resident group came together, we had a big public exhibition with 3 consortiums of different designers coming together and pitching their wares and saying, are we the designers for you? And then they went through a detailed interview process, and the residents chose which designers they wound up with. And I think actually it really helps that buy-in, it helps build trust, it helps forge the relationship at an early stage, and it kind of creates that direct connection between residents and designers. Of course, you know, the project managers, all sorts of technical input into these projects, but I think that relationship is absolutely really important. We'll be doing the same type of setup again at Seavington House, which is a site on Champion Hill, in Champion Hill ward, obviously, which has been a slightly contentious one, to put it mildly. And I don't see any reason why we can't do it on other projects as well, where there's a kind of appetite for it. I think it's a good, healthy thing to get residents thinking constructively, imaginatively about design and building up that relationship with the architects. So absolutely, that's one way that we're getting into a more regular habit of doing in terms of how we run design competitions. In terms of the competition between housing and amenity space, the kind of spread of the burden of development across the borough, and obviously in your ward in 2 years' time, there's going to be a lot of cranes there, there's no getting around it. So I think there's a couple of things here. It's just to really make sure that our construction management plans are really strong. We sign up to the Considerate Constructors scheme, but I sometimes see that it's not as well respected as it can be. So I think one part about the construction charter is to incorporate that and just embed those principles early on, and also use the construction management plans in the dialogue with residents to reassure them that we are thinking through practically how this will work. You know, people elect to have a council administration that wants to build lots of council homes, but few people elect to live next to a construction site. So we've got to both manage that construction site as well as possible, and create all of the wider uplift in the communal environment and other people's homes as we can. And just in terms of the spread of the burden of development, this is a big part of the partnership focus that we have. Is so even within just the estate sites, we've got up. I want to be a little bit cautious here, but we've got they're having great fun next door. I think it's like there's CGS. Yeah. Where's the applause here? Like, wait, construction management plans. You're absolutely right. So, like, we have a real focus to be building more in the south of the borough. We're talking to a lot of the key landowners down there. Even on housing sites, we're bringing forward a lot in the programme. There were a couple in the IDM that I signed off just after the election, and there may be a couple more in the IGM that I sign off in the next few weeks as well. But it has to be spread everywhere. There's lots of border sites coming up as well, which will be fun and interesting for our colleagues in Lambeth and Lewisham. But yeah, I agree.
Jack.
Slight question for the chair first. Obviously, Leo's report concentrates significantly on the council homes programme. Is the Commission allowed to ask Councillor Pollock about any other part of this brief, or are we locked into the council homes programme?
We've focused on the new home stuff. I mean, there are obviously other elements to your brief. I mean, knowing Leo, I would guess that you're probably quite comfortable answering some questions of the other areas of your brief. If you're not pre-prepared on that, I think you might have to accept that.
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions on anything.
Let's see what the question is first, I guess.
Okay. Obviously report on council homes programme, as has been said, fantastic, the more the merrier, bring them on, expand and enrich, fully on board. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and it's something that we've started talking about today, is more the social regeneration part of your brief, because it's all well and good creating seismic shifts in the built environment, but if we're not creating vast improvements in people's lived experience of Southwark, then what is the point at the end of the day? So I've been having a little bit of a read through the social regeneration stuff that's on the council's website and that's kind of out in the public, both kind of the guidance document and the Canada Water social regeneration charter. And I can see them talking about lots of good things, primarily focused on well-being and sense of community and pride of place. But if I'm honest, I can't really see how those charters are going to go about improving those things. I don't see a huge amount of concrete suggestions, particularly in Canada Water. I can see there's lots to talk about further consultation and lots to talk about further engagement with developers. And as you know, this is something that I've talked to you about today, because social regeneration isn't locked into Canada Water. It's something that the council's working on in Walworth with residents and community groups, and as you said, something that we're looking at drafting for the Old Kent Road as well. So kind of the primary question would be, how do you think, Leo, the social regeneration charters are shaping up? How do you think they're going to go about delivering improved wellbeing, sense of community and pride of place? And secondly, I suppose perhaps the most important question is, how do you think the council intends to have buy-in, lock-in from our partners? So, for example, with Canada Water, how are we going to lock British Land into their commitments for social regeneration? In Walworth, how are we going to lock Notting Hill Genesis and Lendlease into their commitments for social regeneration? And likewise with the Old Kent Road, the developments there, because if we are creating these mixed communities that are joint developments between the council and large developers or large social housing organisations, we have to have a mechanism to enforce those, surely. And that's kind of the main question that I would ask.
I'm glad you asked. I think about this a lot and grapple with it a lot. I think the social regen charters are improving. They're getting better as we go along. And certainly with Canada Water, it was the first that we did. It was the sort of the guinea pig, if you like. And I think there is a case to refresh it at some point in the next year or two. There's some good stuff in there. The Old Kent Road Charter, though, is really the first and probably the biggest, obviously, because of just the scale of the development that's coming forward, that I think really follows through the approach that I've been eager to promote. So fundamentally, what's it about? It's about making sure that we are measurably reducing the health, housing and economic inequalities that blight our borough as the key impact of development. coming forward. And when I say measurably, we write down those measures in quite a bit of detail, and we set really clear targets around them. Some of them extremely ambitious and idealistic, certainly for the Old Kent Road. And the key thing really is to track it over time. We have these monitors that will be set up on the council website, and if we're not meeting those targets, the plan has to change. It's all about aligning the top-down strategies and plans of developers, of CCG, of council, TfL, with the bottom-up needs and initiatives of the community, and backing that up with really, really strong research and surveys that get to the heart of the socio-economic reality of each area. So for the Old Kent Road in particular, I'm really, really proud of the charter that we're going to be bringing to Cabinet shortly. It's got resolutions that at the heart of it, we make this the best possible place to grow up in, which I think is fundamental. So in practice, that's tracking the investment in all new free to access youth services, sports facilities, leisure facilities, community hubs, and so on, and making it part and parcel of the process to coordinate those coming forward in the new developments that we deliver. We're meeting the entire housing need, registered housing need of the area, which is a kind of post-war idea that housing need and housing supply are somehow connected. We don't have an investment environment that supports that at all, and planning and everything we do is always in a kind of compromised position. So so we set those hard targets, and we know what the number of people on the council homes register. We will eventually know the number of people demanding an intermediate affordable home in the area will be, and if the development coming forward is not meeting that, then again the plan has to change. It's a challenge, it's a contest, the social region charters, and a whole number of other things as well that are always bespoke to each particular area. We have a first refusal policy for all existing employers and businesses on the Old Kent Road on new employment space that's brought forward, because I think we had quite a bit of a challenge from existing businesses that the rents were rising, and existing important clusters were facing a lot of pressure, and that there was a potential displacement that was going to be happening. So we want to absolutely counteract that, and not just as a general purpose sort of frivolous, flippant offer, but to make sure that the spaces, the types of spaces that are coming forward, are genuinely suited to those businesses. And that's important because it's about building local clusters, building the skill, giving them the stability that they can build the skills base, and crucially get local people into local jobs, good quality jobs. We also, we'll be talking about building the largest living wage neighbourhood in the country. The Old Kent Road, these are hard targets that we're embedding in these social regen charters that then every part of the council has to go out and deliver. In terms of the buy-in bit, because that is obviously the key challenge. So it's easier actually when you've got the likes of Notting Hill, Genesis, I think otherwise, or British Land, when you've just got one partner that you're working with, because it becomes a more strategic partnership. But where there's lots of different developers, like at the Old Kent Road, we get together with them quite regularly. We've got our second developer forum coming up quite soon, where we go through each point of the social region charter and start to really socialise it among those developers and make it abundantly clear that this is the priority of this council. And if you want to make your way on the Old Kent Road, you've got to get in line with it. And generally, I find that developers are responding well to that. In terms of creating the next wave of social region charters, it's all about, first and foremost, talking to the key stakeholders, the councillors, community leaders, faith groups, you name it, and then going out and doing really intensive surveys that will gather all that crucial information that will enable us to determine what types of promises and demands we want to be making all those top-down organisations in the mix. So that's the general gist of it, and it's fundamentally about making sure that regeneration genuinely works for everybody. Easier said than done, but it's the mechanism we're working with. If you think there's better ways of doing it, let me know.
Jack, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a supplemental, if I can. I mean, I think it's fantastic that we have really stringent targets, and I think the emphasis behind the scheme is fantastic. I suppose my question would be how, and I suppose I touched on it the first time. How do you think, particularly once developments have happened, say for example on the Aylesbury estate or in Canada Water, how do you see the council's relationship with those developers progressing throughout, say, the next 20, 30 years? Because if you want to achieve improve health and well-being, it's not just going to happen overnight. It's not just going to be delivered when the building's completed. And it feels to me that we're kind of we have legalistic powers through planning to ensure that people deliver the schemes that we say help us reach our targets. But with this, it feels a little bit more nebulous, and it's kind of saying this is kind of the regeneration that we want. But what do you see the relationship with the council and those developers being in the longer term? So, for example, what's to stop a developer coming in and saying, "Oh, we're all on board with the social regeneration charter," but then actually they don't do anything to deliver it once the scheme's been built? Is there anything we can do there? I mean, do you think there's any carrot or stick? I mean,
yes, in that we're certainly finding for the Old Kent Road that every developer comes with their own social regen charter, which we're kind of like, thank you, that's interesting. And it becomes a starting point for the conversation, and we end up embedding these things in the applications that come forward. But it's you know, in an ideal world, every social regen charter begins before the development does, before the plan is set down. But we've got to work with the sequencing that we've got at the minute and use whatever levers we have. And if there are stronger levers available, then we should absolutely use them. But of course, this is, you know, a lot to do with planning policy and the relationship that Council City will have with the developers as well.
Chris? Yeah, mine much more basic question. Just really supporting what Bill has said about living on a building site, and in Bill's case it's going to be for years. I can only quote where I live. It's a small project, that a few homes, but actually has caused, it started I think 2 weeks ago, and has caused problems for people in terms of they don't feel that they're being properly informed of when certain things are going to happen. So, for example, a very large wall, 5 doors away from where I'm living.
This about Daniel's Road.
This is Daniel's Road. And I visited a man yesterday who wanted to show me that when the vibrations were happening, his television fell off the wall, and he showed me his broken ornaments. Typically, he's not insured. It's one of the more vulnerable people in the community, and we weren't aware that on that particular day, these walls were going to be demolished. And it was just by chance that I saw somebody was doing. We've got at the end of Howby Road, we've got a community garden that we raised funds for, and was actually done by my next door neighbour until he's now got Alzheimer's, but it's very precious to us. On the wall that was demolished was a plaque that said Dennis's Garden. And when I realised, because they were doing some work at the end, that the wall was going to come down, I went round to the contractor and said to him, "What are you going to do about our plaque?" And it hadn't been taken into account. He came round immediately and took it down. I said, "It's actually very precious to us. It just looks like a piece of concrete to you, but it's very precious to us." But in consequence, when the building is finished, we've been told that our little community garden is going to be given back to the council, for the council to actually maintain it. The reason we asked for it to be a community garden was because the council didn't maintain it, and we spent, through grants, not personally, thousands of pounds on that little area. And I'm just wondering what sort of terms of reference the project teams have, because we have, as a project team, we haven't met since the work has started.
Just before you come in, Leo, with regard to the gentleman whose television was damaged, I think we might, if you could either give me his contact details or encourage him to get in touch with me as one of the local ward councillors. That might be a first step. Leo might have something to say about that.
I mean, I've
as
got
well.
photographs of it.
Yeah.
I've visited
I'm
it.
sure. I mean, some damage has been caused as a result of work that the council has carried out. So.
I think what I'm talking about is communication, because people, because of the nature of being, you know, if you're a tenant rep, people stop you in the street, and people are saying to me, "What do you think about the vibration, etc.?" And I make the argument. I said, you know, you don't make an omelette without breaking eggs, and we so desperately need these homes that we need to be prepared to put up with a little bit of hassle. But I think if we liaised a little bit better, so we knew like tomorrow this wall's going to be taken down. And
So we might need to break a few eggs, but hopefully not too many televisions.
But yeah, we have to put up with
let's get the response from
neither eggs nor televisions.
I mean, I explained that when my house was built, I desperately wanted a house, and I'm sure it upset a lot of people in my area when it was being built, but we have to live with it. Yeah.
So I'm glad you've raised that, and again, it comes to the construction management plan and the way that we manage the builder. So one project where we knew there were significant construction impacts over at Chiltern Grove in Rotherhithe. We've gone through quite a difficult process, but we've come to an arrangement where there are very regular meetings between the contractor and the resident group. Crucially, they post the detailed breakdown of the works, when they're going to be doing noisy vibration works to the day, on all prominent notice boards, and put it through local letterboxes as well. And we also have a contractor liaison officer who is there all the time, particularly identifying older people, more vulnerable people, or mothers with young babies who might want to sleep during the day, just to make sure that we're absolutely minimising those impacts, and we're giving people the best possible notice that we can. So if that's happening at Daniel's Roads, then I noticed Tim sort of taking down notes there, so we can definitely follow that up, because and in terms of the gentleman whose television has been damaged, you know, that's going to the liability. We have to be clear whose that would be, but we have to follow that up as well.
Can I say, I'm giving this example, I'm not saying on my estate, because I'm here from Tenants Council, but just as an example of if we're not careful, we can become quite complacent, because the figures look good on paper, but we need to be realistic about how it does impact on
so I think there's something to do. I talked about the considerate constructors scheme, where you're taking full account of the impact on residents or office workers who are in the immediate area. I think we just need to review the effectiveness of that, because we have it on every project, but if there are instances where people are being unnecessarily inconvenienced, then of course we have to look at that and redress it. But we're getting into the habit of having much better liaison and giving people much better warning, and also working out different ways in which we can do certainly foundation works in a way that doesn't shake the ground as much. But something to follow up for sure. Thank you.
And just to say that the Tenants Association is meeting with the construction team at the next TA meeting, so it's not all desperation. Could I just ask one more question? When you asked about the net increase of social housing in the borough, you know, you're building new homes but you're demolishing. Can you give actual figures about what the increase has been? Because you will be aware that people actually are doubting that is a reality. It's so good to have the actual facts, so that we can quote them rather than we're arguing against figures that we had no idea.
I don't have the exact figures to hand. Obviously, you can tell from the way we set up policy and the way we set up the programme that we are only wanting to expand the overall stock of social homes. That's the policy. What I would say is that I've noticed that quite often, particularly on Twitter, that the GLA figures are posted, these sort of net completions and starts, and there's often sort of negative figures. And I think there are a number of issues about how those numbers are collected and scored. They don't take account of the impact of right to buy. They never take account of the actual overall tenure mix of a given borough, the starting point, because we still have a significantly high proportion of social rent housing. It's one of the things that makes Suffolk such a great borough. And also the figures only count the appearance or disappearance of a building at the point of demolition as opposed to the point where vacant possession has occurred. In the case of the Haygate, because obviously the figures were hugely impacted by that project, as you'll know, most people had moved out of their homes long before 2010 when the redevelopment plans began. And it was in the time also when the housing investment environment was appalling. The government had come in and cut grant down to zero, where it was 150,000 per unit. And I think all of these things, and then messing around with the definition of affordable housing, all of these things thrown into the mix create a lot of I think quite sensational figures around the overall stock of social rent housing, council housing. We very recently put out a comprehensive data set of starts, completions, demolitions, going back 15 years on the council website that goes into quite a bit of detail and is broken down by every tenure as well. So I'm happy to share that with the committee. So I think that will give you some of the answers.
That would be very well. Now we've got a full house of questioners on the committee, so I am going to take a 5-minute break when we get to the end of this particular session. But I'm going to move on to Nick first, and then John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leo. I'll keep this one brief. First of all, I wanted to say how impressed I was going around Danny McCarthy House, which is new council homes which have arrived in my ward in Surrey Docks. And to your point about building council homes which are actually of better quality than the private stock, I would say that is demonstrably true. I don't imagine that estate agents of the 22nd century will be talking about most of the property in Southwark as a charming example of early 21st century architecture, but perhaps for Danny McCarthy they might. I had one slightly more detailed question about your point about the embedded energy, which is in existing properties, and how that relates to empty properties, which are in the borough. There's, I don't know, 6,500 or so in the borough, and there's a gradual trend upwards. It's a few hundred each year, it clicks up. It's obviously not an easy one to solve, but I wondered if there was within this a policy for how empty homes could be used as part of a broader vision for housing.
So thank you again. Strange sort of collecting praise for us. I agree with you about the homes on Odessa Street are phenomenal. They're some of the best council housing built anywhere in the last half century, for sure. And I agree also that most new housing built in this period, I like to think we're coming out of it, hopefully, and that council housing is leading the charge. Obviously, it was a council homes project that won the Sterling Prize last year over in Norwich. But yeah, a lot of it is, tacky, poorly composed, visibly value engineered, not worthy of the city. So we're really trying to turn that back in the right direction. In terms of embedded energy in empty homes, so we actually do a huge amount to tackle empty homes. We probably don't shout about it enough. Over the last few weeks, we again wrote to the landlord of every registered empty home in the borough, offering to take on their home, refurbish it, provide a wide-ranging package that might be attractive to landlords, and that we would then take it on and let it. Well, it's early days yet, and it's something my colleague Councillor Kieran William has been leading on, but we'll certainly be able to provide a bit more information on that. But you're absolutely right, there shouldn't be empty homes at all, there shouldn't even be empty rooms. Quite frankly, we need a really efficient use of existing stock.
Thank you, and John.
So my first point was sort of leading on from the point that Chris was making just a minute ago about small developments and the sort of outscale complications they can cause in an area. I won't pretend that Dulwich Hill has the same kind of issues that Rotherhithe's like to face in future years, but I am pleased that Dulwich Hill is starting to play its part in some of the really creative little sites that your team have found to fill in both in terms of completions and the planning approvals that are here in this paper. So I look forward to the lessons being learned from the early work for residents in those sites, but also hope that those kind of sites will continue to be found for the small but significant contribution they make to the totals. I am enormously jealous of the full colour, full information chart that you have in front of you. They're even working on the papers that were sent to us, and some of these figures are a little hard to...
Yeah, it came out wrong. I'm going to send it to you again.
In a paper version, it's possible to cut across. So I was just looking through it. It seems to me there are some quite striking differences in the time it takes from start to finish on some of these projects. And I think, obviously, we all understand that some of the larger projects can be quite complicated and there can be quite a process to go through. It's surprising that some of the sort of medium-sized projects are start to finishing within about a year, whereas there are some here that seem to be really quite small scale and maybe taking up to about 3 years. Could you expand for us on the kinds of things that cause those problems and how we're minimising them? And then separately and finally, if you mentioned it, I'm sorry I missed it, but is there any sign of other London boroughs with similar issues and concerns to their housing stock coming to us for advice on how they can start to be similarly ambitious? Because obviously it would be helpful for us to give them some of our magic formula so that some of the pressure is going elsewhere in the city.
This is the thing I talk about most with officers is speed of delivery. You're right. I mean, I mentioned in my opening remarks that we have a kind of process and procedure review ongoing at the minute, where we're just trying to take anything that doesn't need to be in the process out of the process, and crucially just doing things in parallel where they can be, as opposed to doing things in sequence. And in order to do that, you just need the staff and the headcount to make it happen. And obviously, since the HRA borrowing cap was lifted, all the different councils were looking to expand their teams. They were all trying to recruit the same people. We've come out really well with that, actually. We've now got a fantastic team. I get a bit of flack from some of my counterparts elsewhere for nabbing some of their best staff, but needs must. But in terms of compressing the process, you're absolutely right. We need to. We don't really like doing individual contracted procurements on every single project because it's very resource intensive. It takes far too long, often for quite relatively simple projects. I can think of a number of examples. So we're doing everything we can to try and reduce those and use contractor panels where we know that the builders can pre-mobilise a bit better. But the key aspiration really always comes back to this construction vehicle. What can we do to have the building piece properly embedded in the development process? Because if you can do detailed design, the stuff that the builders often do, and planning design together at the same time, and have enough certainty in the planning process and in the way that you're doing the design process as well, you can pre-mobilise your different subcontractors and trades and your direct staff to be ready to start not months, but potentially or years, but potentially weeks after the legal agreement signed and planning permission is secured. I'm always struck by actually the builders who did the project at Odessa Street, who are kind of a contractor developer type operation, who were able to do something along those lines. I mean, obviously it took them a while to get through planning, and they have all the same kind of difficulties, the complexities of bringing materials in at the right time and coordinating complex projects. But I think that's the end goal that we want to get to, because I think we have to be operating as if we're on a war footing. There is a genuine housing crisis. We get the casework every day of people whose lives are deeply affected by having a crap housing situation. So it's a key thing that we'll be focusing on.
Thank you. So I will give the final question. I have one surviving question that hasn't been asked already. So you're going to take you all the way back to one of the first things you said in your opening remarks, Leo, around, you said that there's a lot of effort has been put in to align new home buildings better with the major works that's going on, and to make sure that there's much better coordination. So obviously, reading between the lines of that comment, there have been some issues and problems around that coordination. But perhaps not. That was my kind of impression when you said that. Is that the case? And can you give us a little bit more information about how that better alignment is going to be achieved?
Yes, I'm slightly looking in Stuart's direction, because you might be able to give a more fluent answer. I'll have a go, but chip in. I don't think it's a reflection of a particular issue as such. It's more about the fact that if you're, we've talked about the impacts of what it means to live next to a construction site. We talked about the fact that not everybody will get a new home necessarily out of the homes being built next to where you live. So it's really just trying to maximise the benefits, minimise the impacts by bringing forward the major work cycle where possible, and managing the housing programme in such a way that there is a degree of push and pull, so that
And the different bits of the council that are responsible for those two different programmes are working quite well together?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Stuart Davis, Director of New Homes, sits right opposite to Dave Hodgson, Director of Asset Management. So they are talking constantly, and it's embedded into the process of how we do new homes to check where we are with the major work cycle. It's quite a big influence on what projects we choose to go ahead with.
I'm going to draw this part of the session to a close, if that's okay. Thank you very much for your comprehensive answers to the questions, and we're going to take a 5-minute break. Thanks a lot. Thanks.